It is that time yet again to discuss the best horror movies. 2024 really brought us a wide array of movies. I saw this email that I received from Letterboxd and it said that I watched a total of 188 movies, not all brand new from 2024, but it still is remarkable considering 2024 was a year for me personally where there was a lot of tragedy and just things that I couldn't control. A lot of obstacles in the way, deaths, and losing family and friends. On the entertainment side, though, reeling back in, let me stay focused on All Is Dread, which is really on par. Really great horror movies. So I didn't want to miss out on doing a video. I really wasn't planning on. I kept going back and forth whether I was going to do a video or not, but here I am. I'm not going to do worst. I'm not going to do mids. I'm just going to strictly focus on the best. Before I get to my top 10 best of the year, I do want to throw out some honorable mentions, and the first one is going to be 2024's Exuma, a South Korean horror mystery, which does involve shamanism. It does feel like two films in one, but I personally really enjoyed the latter half and the inclusion of yokais. The next one would be VHS Beyond. So unlike its predecessors, which focus on a specific year or decade, this one shifts its focus to sci-fi, which was something that I was really looking forward to. Key takeaways or stories that I enjoyed would have to be the first one, so Stork, as well as the frame narrative, so Abduction, Adduction, Stowaway, Live and Let Dive. Those were perhaps the best ones. Next we have Azrael, which is also a Shudder release, and I just want to interject and say that Shudder really dominated 2024 with its releases. This is described as a dystopian action horror film where the titular character Azrael is being pursued by this cult, and it takes place sometime after the rapture. This one pains me a slight bit that it's in honorable mentions just because had it not been for that ending, it would have been a fine film. It would have been okay. But the ending solidified it for me because it is just so adorable. And if you know, you know. Heretic was another horror movie that really surprised me this year. Another great A24 release. Great performances from Sophie Thatcher, Chloe East, Hugh Grant. So basically this movie, in case you have not heard of it, is about two Mormon missionaries who go to the home of Mr. Reed and they become ensnared in this deadly game of cat and mouse. Mr. Reed, who's played by Hugh Grant, he delivers a really tremendous and terrifying performance. His manipulative tendencies and just how observant he is because he weaponizes everything against the girls. The way the movie proceeds from scene to scene to the final moments of discovering what the true religion, according to Mr. Reed, is. Let's go ahead and kick it off at number 10 with Maxine. So this one takes place years after the events of X. We're now in 1985. Maxine Minks is in Hollywood and she is doing well in the adult film industry, but she wants to basically transition into being in mainstream movies. What I really enjoyed about this movie was the thriller aspect. So when I look at all three films, this trilogy, because there may be another one. Ty West, I think, left it kind of open for now, is that every installment is different. It's its own subgenre of horror. It's really funny when I think about my predictions for Maxine before it came out. I was thinking that she was gonna end up more so like Pearl, which leads me to the part that I don't really care for as much with this movie, and that would have to be the climax. I think that's probably the weakest point. Everything else I absolutely adore, like the costumes, just Maxine's attitude, the way she carries herself throughout the film. There was a really shocking moment as well with a character that's sort of like Buster Keaton. Yes, I do have it, but I actually got it for Blair. So because this was his favorite movie of the year. Other than the climax, which could have been executed a lot better, the events that follow, I absolutely adore. The final shot of this movie, it's one of those films that you just have a moment where you feel at peace with knowing that this is where she ends up. This is what happens to Maxine. And I'm just a sucker for 80s movies. So coming in at number 9, we have French horror film Mads, which is streaming on Shudder. So this one follows a teenager named Roman who is looking to score his next fix when he is interrupted by a woman who is frantically running across the road and into his vehicle. So she basically proceeds to stab herself and his night just turns really deadly. He is supposed to be going to this party with a bunch of friends, which is, of course, drug fueled. He starts going through this transformation. So some of the things that I really enjoyed about this film that made me think of movies like Climax would have to be the continuous take appearing as one shot. Great technique utilized in this movie because I couldn't decipher where the shots would end, were there any breaks, but also the shift from characters, starting with Roman and then it goes to another character and then eventually we go on to another one. So I really like that as well, where it makes it like, I don't know if realistic is the right word, but it feels like there's more like stakes, even though I'm invested in the story. The characters, I can't relate to them as much, but just because they're, a bunch of rich kids that are just partying it up. Still, the story itself, where it's going, which is what I couldn't really fathom or really think of where we're headed with the story. But once we get to that point, it is a very refreshing take on the subgenre. That and the transformation and the glowing eyes and just the behavioral aspects. Really enjoyed this movie. Coming in at number 8, we have Longlegs. I mean, I've already done a review of this movie, albeit it's late. If you want to, have my full thoughts on it, you can go watch that video. I also do like a comparison of my initial thoughts, which were pretty mixed to now, which I absolutely love the movie. I love the character of Longlegs. I don't think you could have casted anyone else to perfectly really just get into the character and make it his own. I actually was thinking about this negative comment that I received on my video for Longlegs and how this individual was wanting to have a conversation yet being extremely patronizing. And I just do not like condescending individuals. So when I clapped back, then it was like, no, bro, don't take offense. I'm just trying to have a conversation with you. And we got to the crux of the issue, which basically I'm fake, apparently, because I was somehow influenced by other channels who really enjoyed this film or gave it high praise or high marks. So basically, for me to have changed my opinion on a movie that I felt kind of mid on or unsure, first of all, let me say that people do not have to remain static. And also opinions can change. But not only that, movies can redeem themselves, which is why I kind of just left it to the side. I was like, nah, I'll wait on that. I'll come back and revisit this because I think it does have redeeming qualities. Keyword, redeeming. Redemption. Apparently this individual did not like my opinions on the movie or thought that my initial thoughts were accurate and then I changed my thoughts because I'm fake. I don't know. Coming in at number 7, we have Alien Romulus, which is directed by Fede Alvarez. So in this movie, we do follow a group of young colonizers who make their way to this derelict space station in order to retrieve cryostasis equipment. I recently rewatched this one and it's one of the few ones from 2024 that I own. Such a good watch. And actually really thrilling and terrifying. The moments where we follow this character named Kay, I think it's the way that it's framed, the way that we're following her. It's just you're constantly on alert thinking, where's this xenomorph? This one is set in between Alien and Aliens. I'm not sure how people personally feel about it. I don't think a lot of people enjoyed like the fan service. The first time I watched this in theaters, I was a little bit peeved by some of the fan service and then like the dialogue with recreating the iconic line that Ellen Ripley states. Upon my rewatch, those things didn't bother me. I have to say, this is probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite, theater watch. And let me just say, Fede Alvarez really adds his touch to this movie. For example, there's a scene where the zero gravity is turned on and it's just like the acid just swirling around like a vortex of acid. Genius. Love that. Then also the ending, the last 15 minutes or so of this movie is just absolutely bonkers. So not going to say what that is about because it would be spoiling it, but absolutely amazing. Coming in at number 6, we have Strange Darling, which is directed by J.T. Molnar, and it also stars Willa Fitzgerald as well as Kyle Gallner. So this one was pretty shocking, and it plays out in chapters but not in chronological order, which I think adds to the thrill of it all because this one will leave you shocked. It is not what you expect. So basically the story is about 2 individuals who meet for a one-night stand when it turns into a deadly game of cat and mouse and a serial killer goes on a total killing spree. Basically that's really what I could tell you without going into too much detail. But the twist of this movie and where it ends up, it's so fascinating. I don't really know. I don't have words for Strange Darling. And I was going to say, with this one, I could not stop listening to the soundtrack after watching this film. It is available on Spotify. At number 5, we have The Substance, which is a movie that I did review. And I recently found out that Demi Moore did in fact win an award for this movie at the Golden Globe. So that's very exciting. But this movie, of course, does follow Elizabeth Sparkle. She's approaching her 50th birthday and she's basically just being discarded. Dennis Quaid, who is in this film, is looking for the next new thing. Fresh face in town. I had Blair's grandma and aunt watch this movie, and even both of them, like the two of them, had stated that this movie is so zany, they couldn't think of another way to complete it, to finalize it. The way it ended was, if you've seen it, then you know what I'm talking about. Another one that's really bonkers with its like last 20 minutes or so. And I agree with them. I don't think there's any other way to really drive the message than the direction that this movie chose to go. My number 4 for 2024, Terrifier 3. Definitely takes the spot. Another really enjoyable watch. I think this one would have to be my second favorite theater watch. My first one, like I stated earlier, would have to be Alien Romulus, but this one was this one really outdid itself. I did a review on this. If you want to watch that video, surprisingly did pretty decent for my channel as far as like, you know, engagement goes. I cannot wait for Terrifier 4. And this is probably one of my favorite covers. Coming in at number 3, we have Cuckoo, which is directed by Tillman Singer. So this one is his sophomore feature, his first one being Loose from 2018, which is a really good movie and really unique take on possession. This one being his more tangible of the two. It follows Gretchen, who's with her estranged father, stepmother, and sister. They make it to this Bavarian resort, and they're greeted by the owner, who is this very enigmatic character named Herr Koenig. I don't even know if I said that correctly, but it's played by Dan Stevens. This movie is just so interesting in so many ways. Without giving too much away, let's just say, yes, there is some involvement with the way cuckoo birds behave, but it takes it into a very different direction with as far as like subspecies of humans and then observations being made, what the resort is actually being used for. I don't think this one is going to personally work well for everyone. I may be in the minority with really enjoying this movie, but wow. I do think Tillman Singer utilizes a lot of creative shots so effectively in this movie, because there is one scene in particular that just sticks with me that I'm like, that is one of the best of 2024. And it has to be when Gretchen is leaving her shift and she's biking her way home, which she was told by Dan Stevens' character not to do that. And she's being pursued by this woman. But it's the way you see the shadow. That's always been like a fear of mine. Strangely enough, I don't know why. Just like being pursued, like, but you know, you can't see someone from your peripheral, because I am the absolute worst. I am a chicken shit. Not when it comes to horror movies, but like when I'm just out in public, see someone from your peripheral or you didn't see them before, you're like, what in the There's that, but then there's also where Gretchen started to how the movie ends, and it's very beautiful in the messaging. I know probably leaving a lot of things unanswered, but I think that's the way to end it. I don't need all the answers. I don't need everything perfectly sealed for me. I think it made its point quite clearly. There's also the looping. I really don't know how to explain it. It's an effect that's being used, and it's something that's being used in multiple purposes. All right, and my runner-up for 2024 is going to have to be Nosferatu. This one does take place in 1838 Germany, where estate agent Thomas Hutter is sent to Transylvania in order to collect this signature on a deed from Count Orlok. And unfortunately, back at home, Thomas's wife Ellen does begin to experience nightmare-like visions, and soon the entire town is plagued by a relentless force that arrives. As far as visual aesthetics go, this movie is just top tier, A+, perfection. I absolutely adore this movie. I love that a majority of it is all kind of like these grayish dark tones throughout the whole movie, except for like the very end where there is some sunlight. I really like Count Orlok's hand and the way it's like stretching out over the town and his like power and influence. And Robert Eggers truly did accomplish making this movie his own and narratively just expanding on the 1922 film. He included some new characters. It's just so beautifully told, well performed, great cast. I mean, Lily Rose Depp as Ellen when she's gyrating and, her eyes are rolling back her tongue. She's biting her tongue, which I thought she was going to like bite it off. The movements, I thought it was absolutely beautiful, like hauntingly beautiful. I am not big on possession, but that was a great execution of what it would be like to be possessed. The final shot of this movie is so creepy, yet amazing to look at the same time. It has such a duality to it because it's really disgusting. If you know, you know. I recently rewatched the 1979 film Nosferatu the Vampire, and I absolutely love that one. But I think I actually love the way this new one concluded. I don't know. It really, there's so much more with the messaging and what it's trying to say, especially when it comes to women. I'm not going to fully delve deep into that, but absolutely beautiful film. I loved it. And I love Count Orlok in this movie because he is supposed to look or represent a nobleman. They accomplished that with the costumes, with his appearance, with Bill Skarsgård not being able to recognize him. I mean, perfection. 5 out of 5. All right, we're down to my number one of the year, and that's going to have to be The Devil's Bath, which is also streaming on Shudder. A lot of Shudder releases made it to my top 10 this year. Absolute perfection. And I just watched it on a whim. Like, let me go back real quick because I want to see when I actually did watch this movie. This one is directed by Veronica Franz and Severin Fiala, who directed Goodnight Mommy, a movie that I have not watched. This one, it does follow Agnes, who is a bride-to-be. She's about to marry the love of her life, Wolf. Basically, this life of domesticity is not what it's cracked out to be. Husband who is absent-minded, her mother-in-law who is just insufferable. What we're having here is a woman who is experiencing depression, not being content with the life that she's living. She's struggling to fit into her new community and she just becomes very despondent. What I found so fascinating about this movie and what I thought was a big learning moment was finding out that it is based off a real life phenomenon that occurred in the 17th century and 18th century. I don't really want to give too much away, but this movie perfectly manages to really hone in on those feelings of loneliness and depression. I mean, even though it is set in Austria in a different time period, and that seems so far off from contemporary times from where we are now, the feelings are still palpable. Like, it is so tightening. Like, when I watched this movie on a whim, it had me in a chokehold. I don't know. I felt like real horror, if that makes sense. It's really weird to describe. It was able to transport me to the time period. And something that I found out about this movie was that it was shot in chronological order. They also had the actors wear their garments, like just to look like they've been lived in. On an article that I had read where basically they were not satisfied with the fact that it looked too pristine, so they decided to go that route. But this movie is so beautifully told, yet extremely brutal. The opening of this movie, where this movie ends up going, it's just the different points throughout the film. Brutal is an understatement. Like, it is just so bleak. Sometimes those are the exact kind of movies that I really need in my life, just to break me out of my own bleakness. But then the other thing that I found really fascinating was that the lead actress, who's a musician known by her stage name Soapenskin, she's also the composer of the film, and she auditioned to play Agnes, and I guess she did so well from this article that I had read about the director saying that she was able to follow their command or just take instruction really well, and I think she did wonderful. As someone who, I guess that's not her main forte, could have fooled me because I thought her performance was beautiful, very convincing. So if you have not watched this movie, I would highly recommend it because blown away. My absolute favorite of the year. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed this list. Let me know what's your top 10 or top however many. I hope 2024 was good for you. I'm ready to move on to 2025 and all the new releases that are about to come out. But yeah, bye. See ya.